Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're tackling Pharmaceutical Quality Specialist. We're going to really dig into what these resources tell us about this career path and what it takes to succeed in this field.
Sounds good to me.
So something that really struck me right off the bat was the language used to describe this field, you know? It's
Oh,
not every day you see words like captivating and crucial associated with, well, quality control, right?
yeah, you're right. I mean, I can see why someone might initially think it's all about, mundane inspections and paperwork.
Right. But these resources paint a different picture. It's almost as if pharmaceutical quality specialists are like detectives, safeguarding public health.
Absolutely. They really are the unsung heroes. It's a huge responsibility, making sure every medication that reaches patients meets the highest safety and efficacy standards.
So break it down for us. What's the real-world impact of their work?
Well, it's about ensuring that the medications we all rely on actually do what they're supposed to do without causing harm. These specialists are involved in every single step of the process, from those early clinical trials where they're testing a new drug, all the way to how the medication is packaged and labeled before it hits the shelves.
So it's a lot more than just signing off on a final product. They're connecting the dots at every stage.
Precisely. And that's where their detective skills come in, spotting those potential issues, making sure everything's aligned with regulations, and ultimately protecting the public. Imagine the impact they have on everyone who takes those medications.
It's almost like they're guardians, working behind the scenes to keep everyone safe.
And, it's interesting because when I think about the skills needed for this kind of role, I naturally assume it's all about the hard science. But communication skills are highlighted as a major factor too, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're the vital link between the scientific world, regulatory bodies, and even the people within their own companies. They've got to be able to explain complex scientific data clearly. And sometimes they have to explain it to people who don't have that scientific background.
So whether they're talking to a government regulator or someone reading the instructions on their prescription, they need to make it understandable for everyone.
Exactly. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. There are so many other fascinating aspects to the skills and education you'd need for this career path. It's amazing you mentioned that because one of the things that surprised me most was how it's not all about hardcore science. I mean, don't get me wrong, the science is obviously important, but these resources highlight some other skills you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah, what kind of skills stood out to you?
Well, reading comprehension was listed at 68%, and monitoring came in at 64%. And I'm thinking reading comprehension for a pharmaceutical quality specialist. Tell me more.
Right. You might not think of it right away, but it's huge in this role. Think about it. They're dealing with clinical trial reports, regulatory guidelines, internal documents, all this dense, highly technical stuff.
Oh, I see what you mean. They have to be able to sift through all that information, understand the jargon, and quickly identify any red flags.
Exactly. And it's not just about understanding it, it's about analyzing it, connecting the dots. They might be looking at a 100-page clinical trial report and need to pinpoint a tiny detail that could impact the whole product.
That's intense. So it's like being a detective, but instead of a crime scene, they're examining data and reports.
Precisely. And then there's monitoring. That's all about being constantly vigilant.
Vigilant in what way?
They're like hawks, always on the lookout for anything that might compromise the quality or safety of those pharmaceuticals. Could be a tiny deviation in the manufacturing process, or maybe there are some unexpected side effects being reported after a drug's been on the market for a while, or even keeping up with changes in those complex regulations. They have to be on top of it all.
So basically, they can never let their guard down. They need to be ready for anything. It's fascinating to see those specific percentages attached to these skills because it really highlights how crucial they are. And while we're on the topic of skills, what about the education side of things? What does the path to becoming a pharmaceutical quality specialist actually look like?
Now, you're probably thinking, okay, I need a pharmacy degree, right? Or maybe pharmaceutical sciences.
Yeah, that's what I'd assume.
And while those are definitely common pathways, they're not the only ones. These resources also mention chemistry, biology, and get this, psychology.
Psychology. Now that's unexpected. Why on earth is understanding human behavior relevant in this field?
Well, remember how we talked about those vital communication skills? It's not just about explaining things clearly. It's also about understanding how people interact with medication, how they perceive risk. What factors might influence whether someone actually takes their medication as prescribed.
Oh, I see. So they're not just dealing with, like, molecules and test tubes. They're dealing with real people's lives and decisions.
Exactly. And that's why psychology plays a part. For example, let's say they're evaluating the design of a medication's packaging. They need to think about how the average person is going to interpret that information. Will it be clear? Will it properly communicate potential side effects?
That makes so much sense. They're almost like user experience designers in a way, making sure the medication information is accessible and understandable for everyone.
You got it. And here's another interesting point. Experience and certifications can be just as valuable, if not more so, than a formal degree.
That's good news for anyone who maybe doesn't have a traditional science background, but is still fascinated by this field.
For sure. The most important thing is to show that passion for quality assurance, that genuine interest in the pharmaceutical world, and that willingness to constantly learn and adapt.
Okay, so we've explored the what and the how of being a pharmaceutical quality specialist, but now I'm curious about the actual career trajectory. What does that journey look like?
Well, it's actually laid out pretty clearly. Your resources outline these distinct career stages, kind of like a roadmap showing how the responsibilities change and evolve as you gain experience.
Okay, I like that, a roadmap. So where would someone typically start on this roadmap?
It usually starts with an entry-level pharmaceutical quality specialist role. This is where you're really getting your feet wet, learning the ropes.
So what are they actually doing on a day-to-day basis?
Think of it like an apprenticeship. They're assisting with inspections and measurements, making sure everything's being documented properly, learning all about regulatory compliance, too.
Regulatory compliance meaning making sure everything adheres to those strict guidelines designed to keep patients safe.
Exactly. It's all about making sure those guidelines are being followed to a T, and it's a great opportunity to soak up knowledge from those more experienced folks on the team.
So they're not just shadowing someone, they're diving right into real projects.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they're making valuable contributions right from the start. In fact, one of your resources includes a quote from an entry-level specialist. They said, "My regulatory expertise allows me to provide valuable advice to the pharmaceutical development staff on meeting regulatory requirements."
Pretty cool, right?
It's impressive. It sounds like they're already making a real difference at that stage. So what happens as they gain more experience? How do they progress to that next level?
Well, that's when they typically move into a junior pharmaceutical quality specialist role.
Okay, so what's the difference between entry level and junior?
At the junior level, they're taking on more responsibility, handling things more independently. They might be conducting inspections on their own, evaluating product documentation, even starting to monitor for those potential side effects we talked about earlier. So their impact on the product and ultimately the patients is becoming even more direct.
Absolutely. And those strong communication skills become even more critical at this stage.
Why is that?
Because they're the ones who have to make sure everyone's on the same page, from the scientists to the regulatory folks. One of the junior specialists in your resources put it nicely. They said, "By collaborating with internal teams and relevant authorities, I have fostered effective communication channels to ensure product quality."
So they're like the hub of the wheel, making sure those quality standards are met across the board. And what comes after? Junior.
Next up is the mid-level pharmaceutical quality specialist. This is where those leadership skills really come into play.
What kind of leadership are we talking about?
Well, at this level, they might be overseeing entire projects, managing clinical trial licenses, analyzing data to assess a product's safety profile, and of course, always making sure everything aligns with the latest regulations.
So they're thinking strategically, looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly. They're not just focused on individual tasks anymore. They're thinking about the whole process and how all the pieces fit together. And their impact on patient safety is becoming even more significant, even if it's mostly behind the scenes.
I imagine that's a rewarding aspect of the job, knowing you're playing a part in keeping people healthy.
For sure. And one of the mid-level specialists your resources mentioned put it this way: "I evaluated and optimized package leaflets and product documentation, enhancing their clarity and effectiveness." So they're not just focused on the science, they're also thinking about the patient experience.
Wow, that's a whole other level of responsibility. It's incredible how much their influence grows as they progress. So finally, what's the pinnacle? What does it mean to be a senior pharmaceutical quality specialist?
This is where you've truly made it. You're the expert, the go-to person for all things quality. You're spearheading initiatives, providing guidance on new product development, ensuring the company stays ahead of the curve in an industry that's constantly changing and evolving.
It sounds like they've gone from mastering the technical details to shaping the entire quality culture of their organization.
Exactly. And something that really stood out to me in these resources was the emphasis on continuous learning. They even talked about building a professional portfolio, which isn't something you usually associate with this field.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that because I was just thinking portfolios. Isn't that more of a creative field thing? How would that even work for a pharmaceutical quality specialist?
It's about going beyond a resume and showing tangible proof of your expertise. So you might include things like successful audits you've conducted, process improvements you've implemented, presentations you've given on new industry regulations. It's a way to showcase your passion and commitment to staying at the forefront of the field.
So it's less about being flashy and more about demonstrating that deep knowledge and experience.
Exactly. And that reminds me of something we touched on earlier, the importance of continuous professional development. How do you stay updated in such a fast-paced industry?
It's a good question. It seems like things are changing all the time.
They definitely are. But luckily, there are tons of resources and opportunities out there. Attending industry conferences is a big one. There are also workshops, online courses, and of course, joining professional organizations like the National Community Pharmacists Association is always a good move.
So it's really a field for lifelong learners, which I imagine is exciting in its own right.
Absolutely. You're always challenged, always growing, and most importantly, you're making a real difference in the world.
Well said. It's been amazing to take a deep dive into the world of pharmaceutical quality specialists.
hmm
I think we went into this assuming it was all about, test tubes and lab coats, but it's so much more than that. It's about being a detective, a communicator, a leader, and ultimately a guardian of public health.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a career path with huge responsibilities, but also incredible rewards.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least. So to everyone listening, we hope you found this deep dive as fascinating as we did. It's a field full of opportunities for anyone with a passion for science, quality, and making a real difference in the world. Thanks for joining us.